you owe it to an arbitrary God whose mercy to you rather than to others won't bear too critical examination. If you really start looking at yourself, you start seeing that you don't really deserve this more than this person. Right? So you begin to analyze that, you see that. Stay unassuming. If for lack of license to wear the uniform of who you are, you should be tempted to make up for it in a subordinating look or tone. In other words, if you start realizing, and this is the sense of inferiority, that you don't really deserve to be, you don't have a right to what you have, that can make you feel inferior, and so you make up for that by looking at people with a subordinating look. In other words, you place them in a class lower than yourselves. So, if for lack of license to wear the uniform of who you are, you should be tempted to make up for it in an insubordinating look or tone, beware of coming too much to the surface and using for apparel what was meant to be the curtain of the inmost soul. Because that reality is an inward reality. That's what he's saying. It's not the outward. It's not those, because if you've been given all these gifts and you're just an arrogant monster with the gifts, they might benefit other people, but they haven't benefited you. So anything that you've been given, you have to see it as the bounty of God. That is a beautiful expression of what this is about, of recognizing that these differences that we see in the creation are differences that God has placed. And if He has placed you in a position over others, it is not because of some inherent betterness. It's because that is the nature of the world that you're in, and then it becomes a responsibility. And that's why the highest quality of the Prophet ﷺ is his servitude to Allah and His creation. Because he was a servant before anything. If you look, his entire life was in service to others. I mean, even before he was given the revelation, he was a trustworthy merchant in the service of another. And in the service of a woman, which for many Arabs would have been seen as humiliating. Whereas the Prophet ﷺ didn't have that same view of the world that a lot of people have. He didn't see things the way other people saw it. That if something's honorable, it's honorable, and it doesn't matter what it might appear to others. Now, one of the things that's brought out, which is really important, is it may happen that you will hate a thing which is good for you. And it may happen that you love a thing, and maybe you love a thing and it is evil for you. And God knows and you do not know. God knows and you do not know. If you're given something that somebody else was given, it might destroy you. So you want something, people want to win the lottery. There's all these people that have won the lottery and it's ruined their lives. Completely destroyed their lives. They ended up losing all their friends, they got divorces, and this is the reality of the world. Is you don't know what is good for you and what is not good for you. And that's why you don't ask for specific things in Islam. The sunnah is not to ask for specific things, because you don't know if it's good for you or not. And Thalaba is the great example of that. The man who came to the Prophet ﷺ, he said, make prayer that God gives me wealth. And he said, no. And he kept coming back to him, and he said, Ya Rasulullah, please make dua that I get some wealth, and I promise I'll use it for good, and this and that. And the Prophet wouldn't do it, but he kept, it's called ilhah. The man didn't get the message, and the Prophet, out of his generosity, he won't turn away somebody who questions him, who asks for something. So he made a dua, and this man who used to always be in the front of the prayer line, he suddenly started getting all this wealth, animal, livestock, and he would get further and further away from the mosque because he'd have to go out and graze his animals, and he'd end up not praying in the community. And then when the time came for zakat, he was asked to give zakat, and he said, well, this is like jizya. And so it actually had a terrible effect on him. And that's what the Prophet ﷺ knew, but he became a lesson for others. I mean, that's why I'm even mentioning him today as a lesson. He became a lesson for the rest of the believers. So you don't know what is good for you. Now, one of the things is that good comes to us through the qadar. One of the things that is measured out is the degree of freedom, that Allah created everything and guided it to its purpose. And because the human being was created by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the human being has a purpose. And he was guided, and she was guided to that purpose, which is servitude. And servitude means that one knows that one is in a subordinate position with one's creator and not with anybody else. And therefore what happens is you begin to look at things differently. This does not mean that you don't recognize hierarchy in the creation, but you don't have this value placement on the hierarchy that the people of the outward have. In other words, when you look at creation, you don't know if the street sweeper is closer to God than the physician. The physician might be more beneficial in worldly terms. The street sweeper might be closer to God in piety and in awareness of God, and have answered prayers and actually be more beneficial without even knowing.